The smell of scorched circuitry lingered in the bunker long after the last drone was dismantled. Survivors worked in silence, dragging bodies into a corner and covering them with torn blankets. No one asked for names anymore. Death had become too frequent to personalize. Elara oversaw the grim ritual with a clenched jaw, her eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling where dust trickled down with every tremor from above. The dark between stars would not stop. That much was certain. They had probed the humans' defenses, measured their resistance, and would return with greater force. Elara knew they couldn't wait here to be exterminated. They needed to move, to strike, to prove they weren't prey. Jonas approached, wiping grease from his hands onto already filthy pants. "We pulled something out of one of the drones," he said, holding up a small crystalline shard embedded with shifting lights. "Power core, maybe. Or memory. Hard to tell. But it's humming like a nest of hornets." Elara studied it. The shard pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "Think you can make it talk?" Jonas smirked. "If it's got a tongue, I'll rip it out." They set up a makeshift workstation in the bunker's far chamber, scavenging what electronics hadn't been destroyed. Jonas worked with frantic precision, wires spilling across the table, sparks jumping with every adjustment. Mira hovered nearby, half worried he might electrocute himself. Elara stood over them, arms crossed, trying to ignore the weight of every eye in the bunker that kept drifting toward her. She hadn't asked to lead them, but leadership clung to her like armor she couldn't remove. Hours passed. Then the shard flickered and emitted a harsh burst of sound. Jonas winced. "That's not noise," he said. "That's language." Elara leaned in. "Translate it." Mira frowned. "How? We don't even know where to start." But Jonas was already typing, running the alien signals through fragments of old military decryption software. The program groaned under the strain, spitting out gibberish, but slowly, shapes of meaning began to emerge. A broken, stuttering voice filled the chamber, mechanical and cold. "Sector resistance. Higher than expected casualties. Adapt protocols. Extinguish clusters. Primitive yet unpredictable." The voice cut out, leaving the room in silence. "They're talking about us," Mira whispered. Elara felt a grim satisfaction coil in her chest. The dark between stars were not invincible. They bled resources, they lost soldiers, and now they feared unpredictability. Fear was leverage. The shard spoke again, unbidden, projecting faint holographic patterns into the air. Schematics, star maps, tactical data. Jonas's eyes widened. "Oh, they've given us a gift," he muttered. This is one of their patrol routes. And if I'm reading this right, one of their relay stations is down. Vulnerable." The twins, always listening at the edges, stepped closer. "If we hit them there," one said, "maybe we can cut their comms. Blind them." The other finished, "and prove we can hurt them where it matters." Mira shook her head. "We're barely standing after one attack. You want to go pick a fight with their fleet?" Elara looked around the bunker. Huddled survivors. Scarred faces. Fear gnawing at them like rats in the dark. If they stayed, they would die. If they ran, they would be hunted. The only choice left was to fight, to force the enemy to see them as more than vermin. "We're not waiting for them to finish us," she said. "We hit the relay." The bunker buzzed with disbelief, then murmurs, then determination. Humans had always adapted quickly, too quickly for their own good, some said. But here, that adaptability was salvation. They prepared through the night. Jonas rigged weapons from scavenged alien parts. Mira organized medical supplies, rationed food, and drilled volunteers on first aid. The twins gathered maps, plotting routes through the wreckage of the city. Elara sharpened her focus, drilling every movement, every strategy, until the plan solidified in her mind like steel. At dawn, they moved out. The city above was a graveyard. Towers leaned at impossible angles, casting jagged shadows across streets, split open like wounds. Alien patrols hovered in the distance, scanning with cold efficiency. Elara led them through alleys and collapsed subway tunnels, every step a gamble. They passed bodies frozen mid-flight, civilians who hadn't found cover when the bombardments began. No one spoke. The silence was respect, not fear. Hours later, they reached the outskirts of the relay station. It jutted from the earth like a spear of black stone, humming with an energy that prickled the skin. Drones circled lazily above, unaware of the small group hidden in the ruins. Jonas exhaled softly. "Looks like a fortress." Alara studied it. Alien structures always seemed alive, pulsing, shifting subtly, as if breathing. This one radiated importance. Destroying it would sting them. Maybe more. "We go in fast, we go in hard," she said. "Hit the power conduits, plant charges, and get out before they can regroup. No heroics. If anyone falls, we move on." The twins nodded in unison. Mira tightened the straps on her medpack. Jonas kissed the shard still wired into his wrist console, whispering, "Don't fry me now." They struck at twilight. The first blast took out a drone, its body tumbling like a shot bird. Gunfire echoed across the ruins, a brutal human counterpoint to the smooth hum of alien weapons. Alara surged forward, her rifle spitting blue fire. She cut through one drone, then another, moving with practiced precision. Behind her, Jonas hacked into the station's outer grid, sparks leaping as circuits overloaded. Mira dragged the wounded out of the crossfire, her hands steady despite the chaos. The twins darted through shadows, laying charges at key points, their movements so synchronized it was as if they shared a single mind. For a moment, impossibly, it seemed like they might succeed without loss. Then the ground split open. A massive figure emerged, towering over them, armored in plates that shimmered with shifting colors. Its limbs ended in blades, and its face was a mask of alien arrogance. It was not a drone. It was alive. The survivors froze. They had never seen one of the dark between stars and the flesh. The creature's voice was a low resonance that vibrated in their bones. "Primitive animals. You resist, but resistance is waste. We erase. We purify. You are nothing." Alara stepped forward, rifle raised. Her voice cut sharp through the fear. "If we're nothing, why are you bleeding resources to stop us?" The alien tilted its head, unreadable. Then it lunged. The fight was brutal. Its blades carved through concrete, sparks flying as Alara rolled aside. Jonas fired wildly, bolts bouncing off its armor. Mira screamed for cover as debris rained down. The twins struck from behind, detonating a charge that sent the creature staggering. Alara seized the moment. She leapt forward, driving her rifle's bayonet into the alien's exposed joint. The creature roared, its blood glowing like molten silver. With a final burst of gunfire, they brought it crashing to the ground, its body convulsing before going still. The survivors stood panting, covered in sweat and alien fluid. Jonas gave a shaky laugh. "Well, guess they bleed after all." The first time the sky burned, Alara Vance thought she was dreaming. The horizon had erupted in streaks of white fire, lines of impossible brilliance tearing across the clouds like angry gods sketching wounds into the heavens. She had seen battlefields before, lived in the choking smoke of cities shelled into dust, but this was different. This was not war as she knew it. This was something older, something colder. The end of Earth had come not with a scream but with silence, with the strange absence of thunder where the fire should have roared. She had been a soldier once. Not anymore. She had left the uniform behind after the last continental skirmish, trading duty for a kind of bitter anonymity. But when the sky collapsed, it was muscle memory that forced her to drag people from collapsing buildings, to bark orders to strangers who clung to her voice like it was a rope dangling above an abyss. Her instincts became command, and soon, without intending to, she had a squad again. They weren't soldiers, not really. A mechanic named Jonas, grease tattooed into the lines of his fingers. A medic, Mira, who had once been a pediatric nurse. A pair of twins, barely 20, scavengers hardened by years of poverty. They gathered around Alara not because they believed in her rank, she had none, but because she kept moving when everything else was falling. The enemy descended with precision. Ships cut the atmosphere like shards of obsidian, silent but for the groan of air displaced in their wake. They made no demands, broadcast no ultimatums. They struck military installations, communication hubs, power grids, then cities. Always cities. The aliens, whose survivors had already named the dark between stars, seemed more interested in erasing than conquering. Elara led her makeshift squad through the ruins of Chicago 3 days after the first bombardment. Buildings leaned drunkenly against one another, steel and glass fused into melted carcasses. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the metallic tang of blood. They moved cautiously, keeping low, avoiding the patrols of drones that swept the street. The drones did not take prisoners. They harvested, dragging bodies, living or dead, back toward the massive carrier that hung in the sky like a second moon. "Captain," Jonas whispered, though she had never given him that title. "You seeing that?" Ahead, in the shadow of what had once been a skyscraper, a trio of drones sifted through rubble. Their limbs were insectal, too many joints bending the wrong way, each movement accompanied by the hum of energy cores. One of them paused, a sensor cluster rotating toward the survivors. Elara raised her hand, signaling silence, then pressed herself into the fractured wall. The drone scanned the air, mechanical eyes glimmering blue, then moved on. Elara waited until the sound of their engines faded before speaking. "We move west. The bunkers are still intact near the river. If we reach them, we might have shelter." Myra's voice cracked, brittle with exhaustion. "And what then? You think hiding underground will stop them? They'll find us. They'll burn us out like everything else." Elara looked at her. Myra's face was streaked with soot, her eyes hollow but defiant. It was the same look Elara had seen in soldiers after a week on the front, resignation circling the edges of fury. "No," Elara said firmly. "They don't know how to fight us. Not yet. We don't quit." The twins exchanged a glance, skeptical but unwilling to argue. They kept moving. The bunker was deeper than Elara expected, hidden beneath the bones of an abandoned subway station. The doors had been camouflaged with debris, a crude disguise that had miraculously held. Inside, the air was stale, metallic, but it was safety. Dozens of survivors had already gathered, huddled in the glow of dim lamps powered by scavenged generators. When Elara led her group inside, every face turned toward her. A man in a patched leather jacket approached, his expression tight. "More mouths," he muttered. "We barely got enough for the ones already here." "Then we share," Elara said. "Or we die faster. Your choice." The man sneered but didn't press further. Something in her voice, or perhaps the way she carried herself, made resistance pointless. The others in the bunker began murmuring, questions spilling out. Were there other safe zones? Had the military regrouped? Was the president alive? Elara didn't answer. She wouldn't lie, and the truth was too heavy to place on their already bent shoulders. That night, she stood alone at the edge of the bunker, listening to the faint tremor of bombardments above. Her thoughts drifted back to the rule she had once overheard in a dusty bar years ago, spoken by a mercenary who claimed to have fought off-world. "First rule of the galaxy," he had slurred over whiskey. "Don't mess with humans. We don't know when to stay down." At the time she'd laughed, dismissing it as drunken bravado. Now, she wondered if there was truth in it, some whispered warning traded among species who had tested Earth before. Sleep came fitfully. When she woke, it was to alarms and screams. The drones had found them. The bunker shook as energy blasts hammered its exterior. People scrambled, some grabbing weapons, others cowering. Elara surged forward, shouting for calm. "Barricade the east entrance. Get the wounded to the rear. Jonas, power down the generators. They'll be tracking the heat signatures." The survivors obeyed, panic tempered by her authority. Elara grabbed a scavenged rifle, human stock welded with alien component. It hummed faintly, the barrel glowing faint blue. She had no idea how long it would last before melting in her hand. The first drone forced its way through the cracked wall, limbs unfurling like knives. Alara fired. The shot struck its sensor cluster, and the machine shrieked in frequencies that clawed at her ears. It staggered, sparks vomiting from its joints, then collapsed. The room erupted in violence. Survivors fought like cornered animals, wielding pipes, knives, anything with weight. Drones sliced through flesh, but each human that fell bought time for the others to strike back. The bunker became a slaughterhouse, walls painted in blood and oil. Alara's mind narrowed to instinct. Strike, duck, fire, move. She cut down one drone, then another, her body screaming from the exertion but refusing to stop. Mira dragged the wounded out of harm's way, her hands crimson but steady. Jonas rewired a power conduit and overloaded it, frying a cluster of drones in a burst of white heat. And then, as suddenly as it began, the assault ended. The drones retreated, their bodies smoking, their numbers reduced. Survivors lay sprawled among the wreckage, too many still, but too many alive as well. Alara staggered, chest heaving, weapon slick with alien fluid. Silence settled, broken only by sobs. Mira knelt beside a child whose parents had not survived, rocking her gently, whispering lies of safety. The twins sat against the wall, covered in cuts but laughing with the manic relief of those who had stared death in the eye and somehow been ignored. Alara looked at them all, broken, bleeding, terrified, but alive. She realized then what the dark between stars had miscalculated. They thought extermination would be simple. They thought fear would smother resistance. They thought humanity would break like glass under pressure. But humanity was not glass. Humanity was fire. The more they were struck, the brighter they burned.